What is just like intensely frustrating is that it is incredibly lucrative to destroy the planet. Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gitte Marie and the COP is fully going, COP29. If you're into environment, climate, anything of the sort, you have probably heard of the COP. But if you're just slowly going into environmentalism, or perhaps you just haven't had time to read the news because, like, girl, I get it. This is a video about the COP and what it is and what it's good for, and we're just gonna get a small, quick, easy overview so we know what's happening. Okay. I promised you guys that I would make a video talking a little bit more about the COP. I was invited to stay in Azerbaijan, where COP29 is currently taking place, but I declined the offer based on reasonings I will get back to anyway. So COP simply just stands for Conference of the Parties. It's a very wide description that's being used for many different types of conferences, but what people tend to think about when they hear the COP is the annual climate COP. And it all started in 1992. Where 154 countries agreed to combat human impact on the planet, on the climate. That is where the COP started. And then we have had approximately a COP every year, not really, but close. And the way this works is that the different countries are divided into several categories, sectors, regions, and within these categories, they decide between themselves where the annual COP is going to change, and then the different regions have each their turn to host a COP, and then the small groups decide who gets to host it, who has the capacity, the infrastructure, etc. Last year it was in Dubai, this year is in Azerbaijan. That can alleviate some of the questions regarding why was it in Dubai? Because we don't really know what's going on and what communication is taking place. We just know the final result and what the group comes up with. Okay. And the new agreements that come from the COP, they are named after the host city. So that's why we had the 2015 Paris Agreement and we had the Glasgow 2021 Climate Pact. I'll get back to what agreements we came up with last year. Why is it called COP29? Well, it's because it's the 29th COP. There was a while there where I didn't really know where that number came from. I was just very confused because, like, we're in 2022, what's happening? And these events are typically frequented by politicians, diplomats, and government representatives, as well as NGOs and environmental defenders. The COP is also rife with fossil fuel lobbyists. Actually, last year in Dubai, there was a record number of fossil fuel lobbyists. 2,456 lobbyists were granted access last year. And I think it's also worth mentioning that the COP tends to have some pretty corporate partners, including companies that have deep ties to the fossil fuel industry or are major plastic polluters, like the Coca-Cola sponsorship from COP27, which I am continuously in awe actually happened. It wasn't a hallucination. It just really happened. But let's talk a little bit about what happened in Dubai last year. So after 28 years of negotiations, 200 countries agreed on the fact that we will now have to phase out fossil fuels at some point. Yeah, if you didn't catch that, I'm going to be a tad bit sassy in this video. But it's good that we're finally talking about fossil fuels because it is the #1 cause of climate change, which is also why it's a tad bit crazy how many lobbyists for this industry are present at the biggest climate conference in the world. There was just one thing. With last-minute interference from especially Saudi Arabia and Russia, the final text in the agreement was diluted. So it was more of a vague ambition rather than an actual promise. And most importantly, the agreement wasn't legally binding. It was basically on a trust me bro basis, which I feel like we have to be pretty generous to not call that greenwashing. Vowed to phase out fossil fuels, but when there isn't any clear lines as to what that means and what targets to meet and what milestones to meet, what that agreement looks like will be different for every single country. Now, inherently that will always be the case because different countries have different resources and different infrastructures, different economies, and yeah. However, when we're diluting the text so much so that there isn't any obligation to meet any kind of goals, milestones, it means very little. But when we're not pushing each other to make that happen, I fear very little in fact will happen. I want to talk a little bit more about this because last year when the COP was in Dubai, the president was Al Jaber. And as the host city changes every year, so does the president. So last year it was Al Jaber, who is a fossil fuel CEO. The COP also kind of turned into a fossil fuel dealership program because the same year as the climate summit of which he was president, he also sought new fossil fuel deals for more than $100 billion, which was 4 times as much as the previous year. So clearly not everyone is phasing out. COP28 also had a net zero food plan, but kind of failed to mention the importance of talking about agriculture and the fact that agriculture is responsible for 90% of tropical deforestation. That was also kind of left out. Now this year the COP is in Baku in Azerbaijan, and as I said, I was invited to go before the COP, I think. I turned it down pretty quickly. I was tempted for like a sweet second, and I also made a video where I sort of go over sort of that travel temptation that you can experience sometimes when being offered stuff like this. Anyway, there are a few reasons as to why I turned it down. Obviously the travel part of it is a factor for me as well, but most importantly, I feel like I wouldn't be able to freely make the criticisms that I want if I felt like I had obligations to portray it in one way or another. I simply feel like it's a lot easier for me to say the things that I want to say if I'm not affiliated with them. I think tons of good things have come from the COP in the past, and tons of good things will probably come from the COP in the future. There are some aspects that I just feel like but overall, obviously, it is a very big and very complex conversation to have. We do not need one country doing everything that they can if the rest of the world is not gonna follow. We need to cooperate with every single country in the world to make this happen. And I think it's also somewhat amazing that we are kind of able to do that. What is just like intensely frustrating is that it is incredibly lucrative to destroy the planet. The fossil fuel industry has its long sticky fingers really far up basically every political summit like this. It's intensely frustrating, and I feel like you guys and my platform and everything I do is much better off if I can say these things with my full chest, also saying the things I want to say in a country that does not have free press. I don't know, man. I don't know. The topic of this year's COP, COP29, is finance. So we're going to talk a lot about who is paying and how much they're going to pay. You will probably hear these 4 keywords dominate debates and negotiations: loss, damage, reparation, and mitigation. These are basically the 4 pillars of climate change. It's about funding infrastructure that protects the population against the worst effects of climate change. It's also about transitioning to net zero technologies and systems. And when those adaptations fail, it's about recovering from climate-related disasters. And one key thing here that is very important to remember is that, well, climate change, climate collapse, the climate crisis and extreme weather and unpredictable weather affects the Earth population in a very asymmetrical way. So rich economies that are primarily to blame from pollution and the cause of climate change will see the least of these effects. They will experience the least amount of climate-related impact, whereas poor populations, especially in the global south, who has had very little to do with the actual pollution, whose populations have very low carbon footprints, they will see the vast majority of extreme weather conditions and climate-related disasters. So a lot of these negotiations will also be about holding the global north responsible for their impact, even though it doesn't happen in their own backyard. Rich countries need to fund poor countries in their resilience. Overall, I do admit that it is kind of dystopian that we only just last year finally started talking about the fact that we kind of have to phase fossil fuels out. I mean, like, people have been talking about it for a long time. Individual organizations and politicians have been talking about it for a long time. But last year, the COP also acknowledged it. That feels too late. That feels... Talking about whether we are phasing out or phasing down feels too late. In every sense of the word, mainly because the fossil fuel industry is systematically slowing down the progress. So while I'm such a ray of sunshine, what do I think will happen this year? Well, overall, I'm optimistic. I am always optimistic. I try, it doesn't sound like it in this video, but overall, I try to see the best that comes out of this. Even though it's not the main thing that we want, tons of important conversations will be had, tons of important partnerships will be made, and we need to celebrate that as well. But yesterday, which to you guys a couple of days ago, the president for COP29, because the president changes every single year, he opened the summit with a speech about how every natural resource, including oil and gas, are gifts from God. So there is that.
It's a gift of the God. Every natural resource, whether it's oil, gas, wind, sun, gold, silver, copper, all that are natural resources. And countries should not be blamed for having them, and should not be blamed for bringing these resources to the market, because the market needs them.
Luckily, I've seen a lot of people react to this in the same way that I did, which was, what? Okay. This year, I hope to see some more concrete promises, less vague ambitions, more legally binding documents. I hope that we can hold each other a little bit more accountable for the promises that we make each other, because that's what we need to actually get this done. Anyway, that was it for this video. Let me know your thoughts and comments in the comments down below. I would love to hear, share with the group. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day. I will see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!